Two kids, no future, no safety net. One was a girl who smiled like sunshine and burned like fire. The other was a boy who had nothing, not a name anyone cared about, not a family. Not a single reason to believe the world owed him anything. Good, and yet, somehow, out of all the broken pieces life threw at them, they found each other. That is not a love story the way movies show you love stories. There are no roses. There are no soft moments in the rain. What Beth and Rip had was something older and rougher than that, something that grew in the dirt of the Yellowstone ranch, watered by pain, shaped by survival. And today we are going back to where it all began, when they were young, when they were raw. And when neither of them knew that the other person was about to become the only thing worth fighting for. Asterisk. Beth Dutton did not come into this world soft. She came in like a storm, loud, bright, and dangerous to anyone who stood too close. She was John Dutton's daughter, which meant she grew up watching power like other kids watch cartoons. She learned early that the world respects strength and punishes weakness, so she made herself strong. She made herself so strong that most people around her could not even see the girl hiding underneath. Ate all that armor, but there was a wound at the center of Beth that never healed. Her mother died in a horse riding accident, and Beth was there. She was just a child when it happened, and in the way that children do, she blamed herself. That guilt did not go away. It did not fade with time the way people say pain is supposed to. It sat inside her chest every single day, heavy and quiet, like a stone she could never put down. And instead of crying about it or asking for help, Beth turned that pain outward. She got sharp, she got cruel. She learned that if she attacked first, nobody could hurt her the way that loss had hurt her. Her relationship with her father was deep but complicated. John Dutton loved Beth. That was never the question. But love in the Dutton family came wrapped in expectation and silence. There were no long conversations about feelings. There were no soft words at bedtime. There was land, and there was loyalty, and there was the unspoken rule that you carry your pain alone and you do not let anyone see you break. Beth absorbed all of that. She became the most Dutton of all the Duttons, the one who fought the hardest, felt the deepest, and showed the least. Then there was Rip Wheeler. If Beth was fire, Rip was the silence before a storm. He arrived at the Yellowstone ranch as a boy with blood on his hands and nowhere left to go. His father had killed his family. Rip had survived, but surviving is not the same as living. And for a long time, Rip did not know the difference. He was given a bunkhouse bed and a set of ranch chores and the quiet understanding that if he worked hard and stayed loyal, he would have a place. That was all he had ever wanted. Not love, not success, just a place where he belonged. John Dutton became the closest thing Rip ever had to a father. Not because John was warm or gentle. He was neither of those things, but because John was consistent. He had a code. He believed in something bigger than himself. And for a boy who had grown up watching his own father destroy everything he touched, that kind of consistency was everything. Rip gave the ranch everything he had. He worked without complaining. He followed orders without questioning. He became someone the ranch could depend on, and in doing that, he became someone who mattered. What is important to understand about both of them is this. Before they ever looked at each other the way two people in love look at each other, they were already shaped by the same force, loss. Beth had lost her mother and the innocent version of herself that existed before that day. Rip had lost his entire family and the childhood that should have protected him. They were both carrying wounds that the people around them could not see. And when do people carry that kind of invisible weight? Sometimes they can see it in each other even when nobody else can. That is where this story begins, not with romance, not with a first kiss, but with two damaged people recognizing something familiar in each other's eyes. Asterisk, nobody planned it. Nobody sat down and decided that these two people were going to mean something to each other. That is the thing about real connection. It does not announce itself. It does not come with a warning. It just shows up one ordinary day, dressed like nothing special, and by the time you realize what happened, it has already changed everything. Beth noticed Rip the way you notice a fire from across a field. You are not looking for it, you are not walking toward it, but something in you turns in that direction anyway, because something in you already knows that fire is worth paying attention to. Rip was not like the other boys on the ranch. He did not try to impress her. He did not stumble over his words around her or go out of his way to make her laugh. He just existed, steady, quiet, and completely unbothered by the fact that she was a Dutton and he was a boy with nothing. That unbothered quality was the first thing that got under her skin. Beth had spent her whole young life watching people adjust themselves around her family name. Rip did not adjust. He just stood there exactly as he was, and that was something she had never seen before. Rip, on his side, did not let himself think too much about Beth in the beginning. He was smart enough to understand the gap between them. She was the rancher's daughter. He was the boy John Dutton had taken in out of something between mercy and usefulness. Getting attached to anything that belonged to that world above him felt like a risk he could not afford. He had already lost everything once. He was not about to reach for something that could be taken away again, so he kept his eyes down and his feelings quieter than he kept everything else about himself. But here is what neither of them could control. The ranch put them in the same space, day after day. There is no avoiding someone when you both live and breathe inside the same piece of land. And slowly, without either of them giving permission for it to happen, they started to see each other more clearly, not as a Dutton and a ranch hand. Not as the girl everyone was afraid of and the boy nobody talked about, just as two people who understood, without having to say it out loud, what it felt like to carry something heavy alone. The early moments between them were not sweet in the way people use that word. There were no soft glances over candlelight. What they had was rougher than that and more honest. It was Beth saying something cutting and Rip not flinching. It was Rip doing something quietly protective and Beth pretending she did not notice. It was two people speaking in a language that had no words in it, only actions, only presence. Only the kind of understanding that does not need to be explained because it lives somewhere deeper than explanation. Beth tested him. That is what Beth did with everyone. She pushed until people either broke or walked away because she needed to know which kind of person she was dealing with. She had built her whole life around the knowledge that most people would leave. Her mother had left, not by choice, but it felt like leaving. People left. That was the rule the world had taught her. So she made herself hard to stay for, hard to love, hard to be around, because if someone was going to go anyway, she wanted it to be because she had pushed them and not because she had trusted them and been wrong. Rip did not go. That was the thing that changed everything between them. She pushed and he stayed, not because he was weak or because he had no other choice, but because something in him recognized her. He had his own version of her walls. He had built them out of the same material, grief, survival, the decision to stop expecting anything good, and because he knew what those walls were made of, he did not take them personally. He just stood on the other side of them, patient in the way that only someone with nowhere else to be can be patient, and he waited. That quiet patience was the spark, not a dramatic moment. Not a conversation where everything was said, just the simple, enormous fact of someone choosing to stay when every door was open for them to leave. For a girl like Beth, who had spent years believing that people always leave, that kind of staying felt like something close to a miracle. She would never have called it that. She would have laughed at anyone who did, but deep inside the part of her that she never let anyone see, she felt it land and it changed the shape of something inside her that had been broken for a very long time. Asterisk, some bonds are built in beautiful moments. Sunsets, laughter, the kind of easy days that people take pictures of and keep forever. And then there are bonds that get built in the dark, in the moments nobody photographs, in the moments people spend the rest of their lives trying to forget. The bond between Beth and Rip was the second kind. It was not built on happiness. It was built on something far more permanent than happiness. It was built on the kind of shared pain that rewires a person from the inside out and leaves a mark that no amount of time can fully erase. Asterisk, there came a moment in Beth's young life that cracked her open in a way that nothing before it had managed to do. She was still a teenager, still figuring out who she was, still carrying her mother's death like a stone inside her chest when she found out she was pregnant. For most people, that moment arrives with fear and confusion. For Beth, it arrived with all of that and something more suffocating on top of it. She could not go to her father. John Dutton was not a man you brought that kind of news to when you were his teenage daughter, and the ranch was his entire world and image was everything. She could not go to her brothers. She had no mother to run to. She was completely, terrifyingly alone with something she did not know how to carry. So she went to Rip, not because he was the safest choice, not because she had sat down and thought it through. She went to him because at that point in her life, whether she fully admitted it to herself or not, he was the only person she trusted with the parts of herself she could not show anyone else. That single act of going to him said more than anything she had ever said out loud. Beth Dutton, who trusted nobody, who needed nobody, who had built an entire identity around needing nobody, she went to Rip Wheeler and she let him see her afraid. What Rip did in that moment defined him as a person more than anything else he ever did on that ranch. He did not panic. He did not make it about himself. He did not ask questions that were really accusations dressed up as concern. He looked at her and he was simply there, fully, completely there, in the way that very few people ever learn how to be for someone else. He took her where she asked to go. He sat outside and he waited. And when it was over and she came back out, he was still there, still waiting. Still saying nothing because nothing was exactly the right thing to say. But here is where the story carries a wound inside the wound. The place Rip took her, because Beth had asked him to take her there, resulted in something she did not fully understand at the time. A decision was made in that clinic, connected to her age and her situation, that took away her ability to have children. Beth did not know that was going to happen. She was young and scared, and she trusted that the people around her were looking out for her. They were not. And by the time she understood the full weight of what had happened, it was already years behind her, buried under everything else she had spent her life burying. The tragedy of this is not just what was lost. The tragedy is what it did to Beth's relationship with herself. She already believed, somewhere deep and unreachable, that she was not worthy of soft things. She already believed that love and pain arrived together and that you could not have one without eventually getting the other. This moment locked that belief in place like a bolt through a door. She could not have children. She could not give Rip something she believed a man like him deserved. And so she carried that too, quietly, heavily, in the same place she carried everything else she never talked about. Rip did not know the full story for a long time. He knew something had happened that day. He knew it had changed her in ways she would never explain. But he did not press. He did not demand answers as the price of his loyalty. He just kept showing up, kept being the one steady thing in her world, kept proving through every ordinary day that what he felt for her had nothing to do with what she could or could not give him. That kind of love, the kind that does not keep a running list of what it is owed, is rarer than people admit. Most people love conditionally, even when they swear they do not. Rip loved Beth in a way that had no list, no conditions, no fine print hiding at the bottom. What this shared experience did to them underneath all the silence and all the years that followed was bind them together in a place deeper than romance, deeper than attraction, deeper than any of the surface level things that people usually call the foundation of a relationship. They had been inside each other's most unguarded moments. They had seen each other at the exact point where there was nothing left to perform, nothing left to protect, nothing left to be except exactly who they were. And once two people have seen each other that way, truly seen each other, In the ugliest and most honest light, there is no going back to strangers. There is no pretending. The other person is just someone you know. They become something more permanent than that. They become part of the story you carry inside yourself for the rest of your life. Asterisk, most people spend their whole lives looking for love in the shape they were told it would come in. They wait for the version that looks calm and easy and certain. The version where two people meet and everything clicks into place like a key turning in a lock. They wait for that version so long that sometimes the real thing walks right past them and they miss it completely because the real thing rarely looks the way anyone expects it to. It does not always arrive quietly. It does not always feel safe. Sometimes it arrives looking like an argument. Sometimes it arrives looking like stubbornness. Sometimes it looks like to people who should not work at all, somehow working in a way that nothing else in their lives ever did. That was Beth and Rip. On the surface, they looked like a contradiction. She was chaos, and he was stillness. She was the first one to strike, and he was the last one to raise his voice. She said things that cut deep, and he absorbed them without bleeding where anyone could see. She ran toward fire, and he stood at the edge of it, making sure she did not burn all the way down. From the outside, it was easy to look at them and ask why. Why does he stay when she pushes like that? Why does she go back when she has spent her whole life refusing to need anyone? The answer is not a simple one, and it is not the kind that fits into a neat sentence. The answer lives in everything that came before, in the ranch, in the loss, in the waiting, in the moment she came to him scared and he did not look away. Beth showed love the way she showed everything, loudly, dangerously, and without apology. When she loved Rip, it did not look like tenderness from a distance. It looked like fire. It looked like her tearing into anyone who threatened him without a second of hesitation. It looked like her choosing, again and again, to come back to him, even when everything in her screamed to run. For a woman who had built her identity around needing nobody, going back to Rip was not a small thing. Every time she went back, she was fighting against the deepest instinct she had, the one that said people leave, the one that said needing someone hands them a weapon, the one that said love is just pain with a better name. She went back anyway. That was her love, not roses, not soft words at the right moment. Just the act of going back when every part of her wanted to run. Rip showed love the way a mountain shows love, by not moving. By being exactly where he said he would be. By never once making her feel that his care for her came with conditions attached to it. There is a particular kind of strength in that, and people do not talk about it enough. It is easy to love someone when things are going well. It is easy to stay when staying is comfortable. What Rip did was stay through the uncomfortable. He stayed through her walls and her anger and her self-destructs and her refusal to let him fully in. He stayed and kept his word and kept showing up and kept being the one consistent thing in a life that had never had much consistency in it. That is not a passive kind of love. That is one of the most active, deliberate, demanding kinds of love a person can practice. There were moments between them that said everything without a single word being spoken. A look held a second longer than necessary. A hand placed somewhere steady when the world was falling apart. The way Rip would position himself between Beth and anything that felt like danger, not because she asked him to and not because she could not handle herself, but because protecting her had become as natural to him as breathing. The way Beth, in her rarest and most unguarded moments, would let herself lean just slightly, just enough, into the fact that he was there. Those moments were small on the screen, but enormous in meaning. They were to people saying I choose you in a language made entirely of action and presence. What their love taught, more than anything else, is that the people who are the hardest to love are often the ones who need it the most. Beth was not easy. Nobody watching the show would ever argue that she was easy. She was exhausting and brilliant and destructive and fiercely loyal all at once. But underneath all of that was a girl who had been hurt so early and so deeply that she genuinely did not believe she deserved to be loved without conditions. Rip saw that girl, not the armor, not the sharp edges, not the performance of someone. Who needs nothing? He saw the girl underneath all of it and he loved her anyway, not in spite of who she was but because of the full picture of who she was, broken parts included. And that is what people connect to when they watch Beth and Rip. Not the drama, though the drama is real, not the intensity. Though the intensity is something the show does better than almost anything else on television. What people connect to is the truth underneath it all. The truth that love does not always look like what we were shown in movies growing up. Sometimes it looks like patience. Sometimes it looks like staying. Sometimes it looks like a boy sitting outside a clinic waiting for a girl he cares about more than he has words for and still being there when she walks back out. Sometimes love looks like nothing romantic at all. Sometimes it just looks like to people who found each other in the middle of their own separate wreckage and decided, without making a big announcement about it, that they were not going to let go. Beth and Rip were never going to be a perfect love story. They were always going to be a real one. And real ones, the ones built in pain and tested by years and held together by something stronger than feeling. Those are the ones that last. Those are the ones people remember. Those are the ones that make you sit in front of a screen and feel something in your chest that you cannot quite name but you absolutely recognize, because somewhere inside all of us is a person who just wants someone to stay, and Rip stayed. And Beth went back, and that, in the end, is the whole story.